Hello and welcome to my video about climate classification.
The two main methods of measuring climate classification are temperature and precipitation.
One of the first usages of the climate classification system was by Aristotle, who described it as 5 zones, which are frigid zone at either poles, a temperate zone, which is like the area where Aristotle lived, and the torrid zone. He described the frigid zone as being too cold for humans to inhabit, and the torrid zone also too hot for humans to inhabit due to the lack of vegetation in those zones from his prediction. The most used climate classification system to this day around the world now is the Koppen's climate classification system, which you can see a map of here, and the colours coordinate the different forms and zones of climates that Koppen derived. As part of Koppen's climate classification system, he divided it up into zones and subzones. Here we can see the 6 main zones of the climate classification zone, which are tropical, mild, dry, continental, polar and high elevation. The tropical zone is warm temperature. The first subzone is tropical wet. This is a sort of rainforest area such as the Amazon, and the requirements are there needs to be a minimum of 2.4 inches of rain falls in this climate, and there are no seasons, so it stays the same, does the temperature roughly throughout the year. The next subzone for tropical is tropical monsoon. So this normally has a seasonal wind direction which changes, and at least one dry month throughout the year. The next one is tropical wet and dry. So this is like the savanna sort of thing, sort of like an African setting, and it has a wet and a dry season throughout the year. The next is dry. So the dry zone are the low precipitation zones, so minimal rain. The first subzone is the semi-arid zone, which has little precipitation, and there are certain types but limited vegetation such as cactuses, so it's fairly dry vegetation. The next subzone is the arid, so this is no precipitation at all and no vegetation either. Here we have a picture of the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is the most arid climate known to man on Earth at the moment. And they predict that the last time that it saw precipitation was around 40 years ago. The next zone is mild, so this is the temperature varies depending on the season that the climate is going through. And the first subzone is Mediterranean, so this is a fairly dry climate. The next is humid subtropical subzone, so this is just a slightly bit more drier than Mediterranean, so a little bit less precipitation. The next zone is the continental zone, so in this zone for the climate there is quite a large variation in both the temperature and the humidity throughout the year, and the first subzone is an area of climate with a warm summer. The next subzone is that of a climate with a cool summer. The next is the subarctic, which is normally a climate that goes through a cold winter and a cool summer. So an example of this would be the sort of regions such as Alaska or Canada. You can see a picture of Canada there. The next climate zone is polar, so this is a cold and dry climate zone. And the first subzone for this climate zone is tundra, in which it's a place with quite a small amount of vegetation. The next is the ice cap, so this is an area such as like the North Pole or anywhere there's the polar regions where there is constant covering of ice and snow year round. The last zone is high elevations. This is where you see a climate change rapidly as altitude is gained, such as mountains. So you'll start with at the bottom with some of the other climates, and then as you move further up and the altitude increases, you end up at the ice cap climate region of the mountain. Next we move on to the Miller's climate classification system. So here you can see the 5 different zones that Miller uses to classify his climates. It ranges from a tropical hot climate to a warm temperate climate, a cool temperate climate, a cold climate and then an Arctic climate. This is basically a simplistic version of the climate classification system in comparison to Koppen's version.
Climate in England would correspond to letter C on Miller's climate classification diagram of the 5 climate zones due to 1 to 5 months of the year in the climate being below a temperature of 6 degrees Celsius.
I'd just like to say thank you very much for watching. I hope you found this video of some use. Goodbye.